Good afternoon to our grade 11 learners. This is your School on the Air program where you can learn skills filled with different activities while listening. By the way, you are tuned in to DYDL 103.9 and we will be together until 6 in the evening. My name is Teacher Nova from Ambassador Pablo R. Suarez National High School, and I am here to discuss the first lesson in the 21st century literature of the Philippines, all about the pre-colonial Philippine literature. So please be with me for the next 20 minutes of our discussion. But before we will proceed to our lesson proper, let us first make an agreement. First, make sure that you are in your comfortable seats while listening to my discussion. Second, make sure that your attention is focused only to our session today. Third, and this is the most important, please be ready with your materials for today like your learning activity sheet, notebook, ball pen, paper, or even your dictionary. Do we have an agreement? Very good. Now let us start. Did you ever wonder if the Philippines has literature or literary pieces before the Spanish came and colonized our country? Well, if your answer is yes, then you are in the right track of our lesson. The evolution of the Philippine literature depended mostly on the influences of colonization and on the spirit of age. So pre-colonial literature refers to the literary works of our Filipino ancestors before the Spanish occupation in the Philippines. This pre-colonial literary work simply proves that Filipinos already have civilization even before the Spaniards came. So what are the characteristics of pre-colonial literature in the Philippines? First, pre-colonial literature practices the art of storytelling called oral tradition. That means it is the passing of stories or tales from one generation to another through the word of mouth. Yes, so ancient literatures were probably written on perishable materials like dried leaves, bamboo cylinder, or even the bark of the trees. And because paper was not invented yet, many of the tales from pre-colonial period were not preserved and have simply vanished from local knowledge. Most of what have been transcribed now is taken from oral literature, which means that these stories have been passed on from one generation to another. Okay, now, the second characteristic of pre-colonial literature is it has a theme. So literature during this period has themes, and most common themes reflected are about life, about nature, about resurrection, even consequences or bravery of heroes. So if you have watched epic series shows like Amaya or Indio, typically we see these characters offering gifts in praising their gods. When they ask forgiveness or if they have something bad, they would always make a sacrifice. So this depicts the lives of our ancestors during the pre-colonial literature. proceed to our third characteristic, and that is Philippine pre-colonial literature was considered the truth by our ancestors. Now, during the pre-colonial time, there were no scientific basis yet to explain the events happening during that time. So in order to make sense of the senseless, our ancestors created stories to explain their so-called truth. However, in the modern times, these stories are considered mainly a fantasy, right? But who doesn't love a fantasy? We all love fantasy stories. And the last characteristic is Philippine pre-colonial literature has three forms, and these are folk songs, folk tales, and oral literature. Again, Philippine pre-colonial literature has three forms, and these are folk songs, folk tales, and oral literature. So under oral literature are riddles and proverbs. Again, under oral literature are riddles and proverbs. So proverbs are practical observations and philosophy of everyday life that are written usually in a rhyming scheme. It is obviously meant to entertain while teaching basic skills in surviving local life. In Filipino, these are called salawikain. Let's try this example. Kung ano ang puno, siya ang bunga. Kung walang tiyaga, walang nilaga. Now, can you give me more examples of proverbs? Very good. Now, let us go now to riddles. Now, when we say riddles, these are like proverbs with only one main difference. They demand an answer and are used to test the wits of those who are listening to them. Usually, riddles or Filipino bugtong are used in a battle of wits where locals young and old will join or perhaps watch to see who is the smartest. Another characteristic of a Filipino riddle is their flippant nature. That means they seem to be referring to something laughable, but in reality, the answer is more serious than expected. Now let us try these riddles. Heto na si Kaka, bubuka bukaka. Very good. It is palaka. Sa araw ay bungbong, sa gabi ay dahon. Very good. Banig. Kung kailan mo pinatay, saka pa humaba. Very good. It is kandila. Now it's your turn to give me example of a riddle. Come on. That was was great. Now, let us proceed to the next. The second form is folk song. So when we say folk songs, these are beautiful songs that are informal expressions of our ancestors' experiences in life. Examples of folk songs are, we have the lullabies. When we say lullabies, these are songs intended to make babies sleep.
Gigna ng gabi sa ilang, habang ang bituin ay nag-aabang, iliw ko sa aking sinapupunan.
Alright, so that was an example of a lullaby. The next is we have drinking songs or for tagay. So this is intended for special occasion.
Dandansoy, inom sila, tuba nila loy, wako mo inom, tuba pait aslom. Dandansoy, inom tuba tamis.
Alright, so that was a funny song, right? The next is the love songs or harana or kundiman. These are songs that will capture the hearts of women or men from our pre-colonial ancestors. So let us have this example.
Iniwan mo, iniwang may dusa, at walang awang, winasak mo ang ating sampaan.
So, when we say kundiman, it is a genre of traditional Filipino love song. So basically, it will capture the hearts of everyone who hears the song. Or if we also have songs of death that contains lamentations, loneliness, and grief. And lastly are the religious songs, intended to praise God and worship our God. And the last form is folktale. So these are stories of origin for certain places, their names and their creation. So these are also known as myth and legends. So they are usually used to explain certain events or phenomena in our ancestors' lives that cannot be explained by limited practical kind of science they knew back then. Folktales includes myth. So these are stories concerning details of gods and demigods and the creation of the world and its inhabitants. So examples of myth are like tikbalang, duwende, fairies. So this is why when you happen to pass by a big tree or a balete tree, you usually said tabi-tabi po. So it is already part of our culture. We think everything is possessed by natural being. Aside from myths, we also have legends that explain how things came to be, why things are as they are. Example, the legend of Mayon volcano or the legend of Mariam Makiling. So you could just imagine how our ancestors explain why the ocean is salty, right? Then we also have fables where it features animals, legendary creatures, plants, inanimate objects that leads to a particular moral lesson. So this is basically intended for children since these stories are very appealing for that age. Example, si Alitaptap at si Paru-Paru. Ang bata at ang lobo. And the very famous, si Pagong at si Kuneho. lastly are the epics. So these are long-winded poems about a hero and his adventures and misadventures. So it usually tells a male hero who is born with all the pleasing qualities that our ancestors like in a person and who also has a superhuman capability. So this male hero is also paired with a very beautiful young maiden whom he will fall in love and will usually have to go on to battle for. So our ancestors believed in human beings with superpowers. They believe that they are the gods that dwell in the human realm and that they will protect if we befriend these gods. Alright, so there you go, our first lesson for the 21st century of the Philippines. So before we will end our session, let us do some recap of our lesson. What are the characteristics of the pre-colonial literature of the Philippines? Very good. Now, how about the forms of pre-colonial literature that were passed on from one generation to another? Excellent, guys. Now that we are almost done with our episode, it is about time to answer your activity to assess the progress of your learning. So if you had a hard time to understand the directions, don't be hesitant to ask help from your family. You may also phone your teacher if you need some help. That is all for today. I hope you had a great time while listening to our lesson. Once again, this is Teacher Nova saying thank you for being with me and taking the time to patiently listen to what I have to say. Before going off air, let me leave you these words to ponder. This is from one of my favorite teachers when I was still in high school. Lighthouses never shout, neither fire cannons, nor force people just to get attention. They just simply shine. So do not overload your mind with so many things. Put there just a spark, and soon it will catch fire. A fire which will help you keep shining. Godspeed, everyone, and once again, thank you. Good afternoon to our grade 11 learners. This is your School on the Air program where you can learn skills filled with different activities while listening. By the way, you are tuned in to DYDL 103.9 and we will be together until 6 in the evening. My name is Teacher Nova from Ambassador Pablo R. Suarez National High School, and I am here to discuss the first lesson in the 21st century literature of the Philippines, all about the pre-colonial Philippine literature. So please be with me for the next 20 minutes of our discussion.